Johann Hari opens the conversation by sharing his personal experience with depression and the common medical narrative that attributes depression to a chemical imbalance, specifically a lack of serotonin in the brain. He recounts how, as a teenager, he was prescribed Paxil based on this theory and ended up taking the maximum dose for 13 years without finding lasting relief. This story highlights a widespread oversimplification in mental health treatment, the idea that a single medication can fix complex emotional and psychological pain. Hari emphasizes that there is no scientific evidence supporting the claim that people with depression have lower serotonin levels. Instead, he argues that human pain, including depression and anxiety, is not a malfunction but a signal indicating unmet needs. The reductionist approach of treating depression purely as a chemical imbalance leads to an inaccurate understanding of mental health and often traps people in ineffective treatment cycles. This oversimplification is perpetuated by pharmaceutical companies' marketing strategies, which promote medication as the primary solution despite its limited long-term effectiveness. Central to Hari's thesis is the idea that depression and anxiety stem largely from unmet psychological needs rather than purely biological causes. Drawing on extensive research and interviews with experts worldwide, he explains that humans require more than just physical necessities like food and shelter. They also need belonging, meaning, purpose, and recognition. When these needs are not met, emotional distress arises, manifesting as depression or anxiety. He illustrates this with a story from Cambodia, where doctors treated a depressed farmer not with drugs, but by addressing his social and economic needs, buying him a cow to start dairy farming. This cow metaphor represents practical solutions that meet people's deeper needs. Hari stresses that mental health care should focus on identifying and fulfilling these unmet needs rather than defaulting to medication. This approach acknowledges the complexity of human suffering and offers a more compassionate and effective path to healing. The conversation delves into the profound impact of trauma on mental health, particularly childhood trauma. Hari recounts the groundbreaking work of Dr. Vincent Felitti and the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which revealed a strong correlation between early trauma, such as abuse and neglect, and later issues like depression, addiction, and obesity. The study showed that individuals with multiple categories of childhood trauma were exponentially more likely to suffer from mental health problems and engage in harmful behaviors. This research reframes many mental health struggles as responses to trauma rather than inherent biological defects. Hari highlights the importance of acknowledging trauma and providing compassionate care that addresses shame and unmet emotional needs. Even brief moments of validation and empathy from healthcare providers can significantly reduce depression and anxiety, underscoring the power of human connection in healing trauma. Hari critiques the pharmaceutical industry's role in shaping mental health treatment, pointing out that the system is driven by profit rather than patient well-being. While antidepressants and other medications can provide relief for some, they are often oversold as universal solutions. The industry's marketing promotes a simplistic, chemical imbalance narrative that encourages reliance on drugs, even though long-term studies show many patients relapse or do not experience significant improvement. He argues that the healthcare system's incentive structure discourages non-pharmaceutical interventions, such as social prescribing or community-based support, because these approaches are less profitable. This creates a cycle where patients are medicated but remain unwell, while more effective, low-cost solutions are overlooked. Hari calls for political and systemic change to realign healthcare priorities with genuine healing rather than profit. One of the most hopeful parts of the discussion centers on social prescribing, an approach pioneered by doctors like Sam Everington in East London. Instead of relying solely on medication, social prescribing connects patients with community groups and meaningful activities, such as gardening clubs. Hari shares the story of Lisa Cunningham, who found recovery through participation in a community garden, illustrating how social connection and purposeful engagement can be powerful antidepressants. This approach addresses loneliness, one of the key contributors to depression and anxiety in modern society. Hari notes that a significant portion of people feel unknown or isolated, and prescribing social activities can restore a sense of belonging and purpose. Despite strong evidence supporting social prescribing, it remains underutilized due to systemic barriers and lack of financial incentives, highlighting the need for broader adoption and support. Attention problems, including ADHD, are explored as part of a broader societal crisis rather than isolated medical conditions. Hari describes how modern technology, especially social media platforms, is designed to hijack and fragment our attention for profit. Algorithms track user behavior to maximize engagement, often by exploiting human negativity bias, which makes us more likely to focus on anger or fear-inducing content. This engineered distraction contributes to widespread difficulties in focusing, especially among young people. Hari shares personal anecdotes about his godson's struggle with constant digital stimulation and the challenge of reclaiming meaningful attention in a world saturated with addictive technology. The crisis of attention is thus linked to systemic forces that profit from our distraction, requiring both individual strategies and collective action to address. The podcast touches on the often overlooked impact of diet, particularly food additives and dyes, on mental health and attention. Hari references studies like the Southampton study, which demonstrated that exposure to certain food additives increases hyperactivity and attention problems in children. He contrasts regulatory approaches, noting that the European Union has banned many harmful additives that remain common in American foods. This issue has become politicized, but Hari advocates for transcending tribalism to focus on the scientific evidence. He acknowledges figures like RFK Jr., who have raised awareness about food-related toxins, while cautioning against embracing conspiracy or misinformation. Addressing dietary factors is a low-cost, high-impact opportunity to improve mental health and cognitive function, deserving more attention in public health discussions. Hari critiques contemporary education systems for stripping meaning and creativity from learning, which exacerbates attention problems and mental health issues in children. He explains that schools often prioritize rote memorization and standardized testing over engagement and purpose, creating environments that deaden curiosity and fail to nurture diverse talents. This rigid structure contributes to the rise in ADHD diagnoses and medication among students. He contrasts this with alternative models, such as Finnish schools, which emphasize shorter lessons, play, and less homework, resulting in better attention and well-being among students. Hari argues for a fundamental redesign of education to foster creativity, empathy, and deep focus, skills that artificial intelligence cannot replicate. Such reform would better prepare children for the future and support their mental health. Throughout the conversation, the theme of shame emerges as a critical factor in mental health struggles. Hari explains that trauma and distress are often compounded by societal shame, which isolates individuals and prevents healing. He cites research showing that shame, rather than trauma itself, is a major driver of poor health outcomes, including earlier mortality in stigmatized groups. Validation and empathy from others, even in brief encounters, can release shame and act as powerful antidepressants. This insight calls for a shift in how healthcare providers and society at large respond to mental health challenges, moving from judgment and pathologizing to compassion and understanding. Reducing shame opens pathways to recovery and reconnects people to their inherent worth. Hari situates the mental health crisis within broader political and economic systems that prioritize profit over people. He highlights how healthcare, technology, and urban planning are shaped by incentives that often worsen social isolation, stress, and illness. For example, reduced investment in public spaces and housing designs that isolate residents contribute to loneliness and depression. He argues that meaningful change requires political action to dismantle these dysfunctional incentives and create systems that support human needs. While the scale of the challenge is daunting, Hari draws parallels to historical social movements, emphasizing that collective action and democratic engagement can overcome entrenched power structures. He urges listeners not to despair, but to participate in building a more humane society. Despite the gravity of the issues discussed, Hari maintains a message of hope and optimism. He recounts historical examples, such as the fight for gay marriage and the removal of lead from gasoline, to illustrate how seemingly insurmountable problems can be overcome through persistent, compassionate activism. These victories demonstrate that powerful vested interests can be challenged and changed. Hari encourages embracing complexity and rejecting simplistic narratives, while also recognizing the potential for transformation through community, political engagement, and systemic reform. He stresses that addressing mental health and attention crises is not just an individual responsibility, but a collective one, requiring society-wide commitment to meeting human needs and restoring connection.